Every aspect of my life has been shaped by music. At 5 years old, I started to learn how to play the piano, and I took lessons for 6 years. Right as I entered middle school, I then decided to attempt to play the clarinet. 7 years worth of formal instruction and private lessons have since passed, and music is just as important to me today as it was when I was 5. This makes me question, where would I be today without music? It has become such an integral aspect of my life, and has shaped me into the person I am today. Without music, I may not have been as successful in high school, have as many friends, or even be standing here in front of you, giving this presentation as a student of Georgia Tech. For many people, music is solely an interest. They may only desire to listen to it or appreciate it and not participate in its creation. However, there are a few people like myself where music defines themselves. Playing an instrument or singing provides creative stimulus and stress relief, and music is extremely expressive and artistic. When we choose to take part in this magic, it changes us in more ways than we could ever expect. Intense musical study has many intellectual benefits that apply to all aspects of life. Let's pick something completely random, such as applying to Georgia Tech. When completing the application, most people focus on standardized test scores and grade point average. Music may be the last thing that Georgia Tech considers as pertinent, when in reality, Georgia Tech is looking for musicians to apply. There are many aspects of a musician that set them apart from the rest, one of which is the tenacity to achieve their goals. Any serious musician can attest to the countless hours of practice needed to reach a high-quality result. Georgia Tech is a school known for its intense academic rigor, to which many people cannot handle. Musicians are predisposed to the stress of hard work and are up for the challenge, and that is something that Georgia Tech admires in an applicant. Although hardworking students are always an asset, schools like Georgia Tech also want to see some large numbers on your transcript. You can be the principal trumpet player for the Atlanta Youth Symphony Orchestra, but if your grade point average is well below a 3.0, the odds are not in your favor for acceptance. But how often do you meet a talented musician who does exceptionally poorly in all of their academic areas? It is all in how a musician's mind operates. Here's one thing I will clarify early on. Playing an instrument doesn't necessarily make you smarter, but it does make you a better applicant. Musical stimulus has been proven to create more abstract and creative thought processes. These processes then mold personalities into becoming more interesting, leading to different interests and activities. Colleges love diversity and creativity, and music is the best way to achieve both. The minds of musicians set them apart from the rest of the application pool, and in other ways you may not expect. Over long periods of time playing an instrument, studies have shown that the brain will actually grow in size in the specific regions active for musical performance. If you've taken a biology class, you know that neurons grow very slowly and over time cease to be created, which is important to remember. It is easier and more beneficial to learn to read music or play an instrument at a younger age. From the moment that we are born, we undergo periods of time in which we are more sensitive to learning than others. The most sensitive times peak during the first 4.5 years in life and decline as we age into adults. The more exposure a child has to music at a younger age, the more the brain will grow in response to the music. These scans are of students with and without musical training during a series of tests. On average, a student who takes formal instruction for 3 or more years will improve in their fine motor skills and auditory discrimination. You may be thinking, how do fine motor skills help me get into Georgia Tech? While there may not be a fine motor skills section on the SAT, the development of these skills will ultimately lead to the increased ability of many other skills. The most active brain regions during performance are the frontal and temporal lobes. This seems logical, since the temporal lobe is responsible for defining sounds and the frontal lobe controls body movements. What you may not realize is that the frontal lobe is also in charge of problem solving, concentration, and personality, and the temporal lobe controls long-term memory. These regions increase in size with practice, and the student becomes more skilled at these respective abilities. 2 major testing skills are directly affected by these changes in the brain. One is concentration. The SAT is a 4-hour-long exam that leaves students mentally exhausted after it is completed. Musical training requires long periods of time with a strict focus on a particular topic. Development of a practice routine over time helps the student's brain prepare for mind-numbing examination later in life. The second is basic memory recall. One of the most challenging sections of any standardized test is the critical reading portion. Musicians often have exceptional memory through learning scale patterns and practicing music repeatedly. This skill comes in handy when scanning through excerpts on a test and having to answer content-based questions with little time to spare. This sounds terrific. Let's have all of our children start learning how to play an instrument. Well, there's only one issue with musicianship, and that is the price tag. Once you add up the cost of instruments, repairs, music lessons, and more, you come to realize that learning to play an instrument can be extremely expensive. It has also been proven that students with better socioeconomic background do substantially better on standardized testing scores, too. So is there really a correlation between music and test scores? The more money a family makes, the more access they have to test preparatory courses and better education, and therefore have access to a musical education. While a high income and musical education are not mutually exclusive, meaning they can occur at the same time, it turns out that they are independent of each other, which when it comes to standardized testing scores. A study released in 2007 analyzed the relationship between student participation in music education and standardized testing scores. The results were irrefutable. It was estimated that the students who were musically educated scored higher on the SAT and the ACT than students who were not musically educated. The concentration of musical training is equivalent to that of taking a standardized test. Here's how the data broke down. On average, students who were musically educated did 22% better in the reading section, 31% better in the writing section, and 20% better on the mathematics section of standardized tests. This was true across different standards of living, from the very rich to the very poor. It was also discovered that student participation in music was the only activity that demonstrated positive academic progress. And it didn't matter the type of musical education that was taught either. Students tested varied from band, chorus, orchestra, guitar, piano, and other disciplines. Even still, the quality of the musical education was irrelevant. Students in what are considered good musical education and poor musical education still did better on standardized testing scores than non-musicians. This goes to show that the effects of music stem more from just socioeconomics. To play an instrument is the wonderful gift that keeps on giving. By learning how to read music, practice, and listen to music, it ultimately changes the brain of the musician. He becomes more creative and logical, which ultimately helps him to do well on his standardized tests. This is why the musician has the best application for college, and why Georgia Tech is looking for musicians. And many of you have expressed that you play an instrument or appreciate its beauty, which already builds a connection from your musical background to sitting in this classroom at Tech today. Who knows? The admittance rate this year was at an all-time low, and the competition was fierce. The effects of music on your brain could have made all of the difference.